I've been very fortunate enough to have a process from a young girl all the way to the professional level of sport and been able to extract what's most important out of that. The only way I found that was like diving deep into myself to figure out myself. Then I can help the world and then I can create what I wish existed.
You're listening to the Kristof Lewis podcast, a podcast where I have conversations with inspirational people. My name is Chris, but my family calls me Kristof. My goal is to have as many conversations as possible with people who have forged their own path by pursuing their dreams, making them a reality, all the while emitting positivity and sharing this knowledge with others. I seek these people out and share this information with you, proving to the world that you can do what makes you happy and do what you want for a living while being a good human being. We'll talk about careers, but we'll also cover any story that inspires. Let's do this while helping each other. Thanks for listening. I'm happy you're here. Hey everyone, welcome to the Kristof Lewis podcast. This is conversation number 61, and I'm so excited to be here today. I just had a wonderful conversation with my guest, Morgan Jones, who is a WNBA player. How cool is that? I love when I get firsts on here, and that's my first basketball player, so I love new careers, and that's the first time for this. But she's also an entrepreneur. She started a company called Athletes to Visionaries, where she helps students and athletes think beyond sports, because sometimes not everybody is able to go all the way to the top in sports, and even when you go to the top, that has a finite timeline. So what happens after that? She helps them with that. We talked about a plethora of just amazing things, deep dive into emotional intelligence within ourselves, becoming self-aware, being actionable, and helping children realize all this stuff as well. I had a wonderful time. I'm very excited for this conversation, for you to listen to it. Remember that you can find all these wonderful, amazing conversations and the contemplation episodes at kristoflewis.com/podcast. So without further delay, welcome to the Kristof Lewis podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited.
I'm extremely excited. I'm always so excited for these conversations, and there's never not a conversation that I'm not excited for. And you, for a plethora of reasons, I'm excited for. But one of those reasons is because I haven't talked to a basketball player yet. I've talked to a few sports players, but I haven't talked to a basketball player yet. Somebody that loves sports, somebody that loves basketball. Over top of all of that stuff, one of the huge pillars that this podcast stands on that we were just talking about is you help other people immensely. So I was really excited to talk to you for all of those reasons. So thank you for being here.
Yes, I'm super excited. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, and I do my research on some people, and I was looking at you, and I was like, holy crap, like she has like really impressive stats for your high school career and your college career, and I was like, holy crap, you've been credited with good floor vision and all these other things, and I was like, wow, and I stopped for a second, and I was like, credited with good floor vision, and I was like, I wanted to talk to you about your Athletes to Visionaries, and I was like, I bet that's why. How she created this is because she's always had good vision on the court, and that carries over to outside of the court, outside of sports, because there can be more than sports. Some people think sports is life, and it is to some extent, but there's a whole other life that sometimes happens abruptly outside of sports, and that's where you come in. And you created Athletes to Visionaries, and I don't want to answer it for you, but I was like, I wanted to dive into that, and I was like, I bet that's why.
Yeah, I mean, that's awesome that you put that together, because that's exactly right. And,
oh, cool.
I'm a life coach for female athletes, and I founded Athletes to Visionaries, and helps athletes own their process and develop a vision beyond their present, essentially. And going back to your point, as the type of player that I was a player that could see the entire floor. I was the player that knew the pass before the pass, or the assist before the assist, if you will, to get that open shot. So totally makes sense. And even off the court as a player, in the dynamic with my team, and just how to see things a little bit differently, be able to pinpoint where we can improve, and the setbacks and failures and how that all goes together, essentially vision, bigger picture, national championships, things like that. So it does. It all goes together. Absolutely.
That's really cool. I like that. And I played soccer my entire life, from I was 4 years old all the way up until probably about my mid-20s, and I need to get back into it. I'm actually in a physical hiatus where I can't work out. That's a whole other story. But what I realized from, these sports, you said thinking plays a part. And I always talk to other people about soccer, about thinking about it like a chess match. If you're playing chess and you're thinking all these moves ahead, you're not just thinking about where that pass is going to take you, but if I get the pass from him or her, where am I going to play then? But not only there, like then where is that person going to play to, and so on and so forth. So I can see that connection where you're taking it from sports and you're taking it to life. And I really like that because number one, it's super applicable to just sports like we were talking about. But in life, like you don't know what's going to happen. So if you are ready, for the most part, so if you're already playing a couple moves ahead, then a lot of times, like before you get that life ball, you're gonna be a planner, and you're gonna kind of know when you get that ball where you're gonna move with it next. So I really like that, and I think it's great. And one of the other things I love to talk about is helping other people. So now you're taking all of these things, your strengths, which is super important. Reminds me of a book I read behind me. If you guys are looking for another book, it's called The One Thing. I think it's by Gary Keller, or that might be another book, but the title of the book is The One Thing, and it's obviously about focusing in on your one thing. So focusing in on your strengths instead of tripling down on your strengths as opposed to, oh my gosh, I'm not very good in these areas, so let's, spend / maybe waste time in the areas that I'm not good. But you recognize these things, you embrace the heck out of your strengths, and now you're helping other people like that. And one of the questions I like posing is, okay, so you have these strengths and you're good at these things, but why do you choose to help people with what you're good at?
I choose to help people with my strengths because I see the world and I see young girls or people struggling, and in my heart, it moves differently. Mm-hmm. I think there's some things like you can't really explain necessarily why you do it. Yeah. But I've been very fortunate enough to have a process from a young girl all the way to the professional level of sport and been able to extract what's most important out of that. And the only way I found that was like diving deep into myself to figure out myself. Then I can help the world. Yeah. And then I can create what I wish existed. Yes. So really and truly, that's all I'm doing. I'm practicing self-awareness, knowing myself, knowing my story, knowing my journey, and then putting it into action. And so with those two coming together is why and where I'm going and why I am where I am.
No, I absolutely love that. And those two huge points that I took away are, of course, self-awareness and action. Yeah. And it all starts with, at least in my personal journey, it's been self-aware. Like, it's so crazy because I lived so much of my life, and I felt like not until 6 or 7 years ago, I'm 31 now, so 6 or 7 years ago did I really become to evolve into the person that I am right now, looking at you, speaking to you. And it's because of that self-awareness. And it didn't stop with just like one day. Well, first of all, it didn't happen just one day. And it didn't stop one day like, oh, I'm self-aware now, I'm good. But it's this constant evolution. And then, I say all the time, so if you've heard more than one of these, that I always want to be learning until the day I die. Like there's no reason why I should stop learning. And I would say to anybody why you should stop learning. But then action. So action's on the other side of that. Like I've been reading a lot of books lately. Like you can read all the books you want. You can have all the great conversations like we're having with each other right now, exercising each other's brains. But if we don't apply or we don't act on anything that we're talking about right now, and it just stays this awesome thought in our head, like ultimately, we're better off for doing that, but it doesn't really mean anything if we don't go out there, we don't share that knowledge like you are and like we are right now by recording this podcast. And then you're going out there and you're coaching these female athletes. So I think that's a great answer. I love that. Those are two great points to take away. And then helping people is one thing, and all these things that we just talked about is so cool. But going out there and actually creating something like Athletes to Visionaries, first of all, it's an awesome name because I was always an athlete. I love that about, and it's just so funny because, well, I'll digress for a second. For the second part of that, visionaries. We need visionaries. We need people that are going to think outside the box and help other people and have this to continue. And then I love talking I have so many entrepreneurs on here, people like that. And then all these things, like I love connecting all the dots because they all roll into one, like self-awareness, action, helping other people, like constant self-education as well as formal education. Like, there's so many ways to attack this, but it all starts with what you said, with self-awareness.
Yeah, and I know the one of the quotes that I heard once was, "It's not knowledge is power, knowledge is potential." And I think seeing that as like, taking in what other people are saying and its potential if you go use it, its potential if you allow it to plant a seed and show up in your life at some point. And that's kind of like the approach that I take in when I work with female athletes, whether it's an individual or it's a group or it's a large speech, if you will, is not so much focusing on the results of like an exchange. What am I going to get out of this? What are they going to get out of it? But going in there, sharing my truth, sharing my knowledge, and providing them with some potential nuggets that they can use as they continue their life. Because there's a lot of people that came into my life when I was in the height of being an athlete. And, they said a lot of different things. Some stuck, some didn't. But as I move forward in my life, I think back to those things that my coach did for me, or, my teammates taught me, where I thought I was being, attacked, but I'm like, actually it was teaching me this. So, it's not
funny how that works.
Yeah, isn't it funny?
It's so funny how it works when you look back on those things. It's like you were asking me before we started recording about like my daughter. She's 3 months old, and like parenting is like one of those things where you look back and never, like, I think about my parents in a whole new light now. Like, some of the things they put me through in coaching, like leadership, all of these things that are essentially synonymous. Like, you may, when you're being led in that moment, not really understand why your coach is saying this, or why are my parents making me do it this way. And then now I'm a parent and I'm like, oh my God, holy shit. Like, that's why I was an asshole. I should have listened to them, like that whole thing. And a lot of times in coaching, that's the whole thing. So it's really funny how that goes. But one of the things that you said that I really liked, that I picked out, was that you're not only just like coaching or, talking to people, lecturing them or whatever, but you're giving them these options and these ideas, and you're implanting these ideas into their head, but not just saying this is what you need to go do, but giving them like, hey, these are some new ideas. Be a visionary, take this information, and then you think about how you want to use this information, instead of just like a straight lecture and telling them what you should know. And I think that's really cool. And I want to circle back again, and just you creating Athletes to Visionaries is very cool. Not just going out there. I didn't really finish this earlier thought, but not just going out there and helping people, but creating an entity like that, some structure and some form, and going out there and helping people in that manner is awesome.
Yeah, and I think it's just providing that space for conversation, for thought and choice. Just having that space to kind of challenge some different ideas and thoughts that have been put on you that you don't even realize you've adopted.
Yeah.
But maybe I could do this, or maybe that wasn't the truth about what she said about me, and I think we get so caught up in our routine with the same people, the same friends, and X, Y, and Z, and you never really stop to think, whoa, what do I want? What does this really mean in terms of my life? And what kind of choices do I want to make to get to this person, that I want to be?
Yeah.
So it's providing that space.
Yeah, like thinking about, it's so funny because we get wrapped up in the flow of things, and it just makes me feel like, as you were talking, I was like, sometimes we just need to take a step backwards and like breathe and like assess the situation, like what's actually going on, because we're just moving at the speed of light, It's just absolutely crazy. And even more so, again, on Athletes and Visionaries, why I love that, because I love when people go out there. If you like want to see change, again, I was talking to my friend Jason, and he's like, don't say that things are cliche. Cliches are there for a reason. It's because they're really good. But like, if you want to see a change in the world, like, go out and create it. If you want to meet more people that want to encourage you and better you, and you want to better other people, go out there, create groups. There's so many apps up there, like Meetup and just things like this. You don't need to be an entrepreneur and create a company or something like this. But again, like, why I like that is because you're going out there and you can create a group, create a meetup, hang out with some friends, we're living in the social media age. Like, if you want to be with people like this and help encourage people and be encouraged, mentor and be a mentee, go out there, create your world. It's like literally at your fingertips. You can do what you want in real time. It's so cool.
Yeah, it's so cool. And it's never been like this. And I always laugh because, some of the girls that I work with, they have 20,000, 30,000 followers on social media. Yeah. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I got social media my freshman year of college. These girls have it from like
Yeah.
eighth grade,
Yeah.
so they're able to start to kind of build their image and figure out, what they kind of stand for and what they like and what they don't like, and see the world differently than we saw it growing up.
Yeah. It's
Which
completely
I think is
different.
a great opportunity, but it also can be confusing in defining who you are.
It can be really confusing because there's a lot of noise. There's just so much
Yeah.
information. I read a quote last night in the book I'm currently reading right now. What I think the quote was in the book was, like you said, it's so easy now. So the problem we're having right now is not necessarily like, where do I get from my information or how do I get my information, but it's like, how do I filter this insane amount of information? So you're saying these girls since like eighth grade, they've been building up these social media platforms and they've been engulfed in their entire life. So yeah, there's a lot of information coming in. You're meeting way more people than you would ever meet. The 6 degrees of separation, I think, is down to like 2 point something. I read a stat on, like, it's insane. It's insane. So how do we filter this information the best? And I think the part of that answer is you have the ability to manually filter that by following certain things, unfollowing certain things in this life that we're living right here. I want to go back to Athletes to Visionaries because I think that's really important. And you specifically, you help athletes think beyond the game. You help them be prepared. You clearly, again, with your vision, you saw a problem and you filled the gap. But did you see a lot of you work with females particularly, but did you see a lot of people in general have this issue where they were so engulfed, speaking of being engulfed in things, so engulfed in sports, thinking that that's all they ever wanted to do in their life, which is great. Be impassioned and go hard about it. I get it. But sometimes, especially in sports, like not everybody can ride the sports train all the way to the top. Somebody has to fall off for there to be college, to be pro. Is that you saw issue with people just focusing in all the way on something, and then that dream unfortunately ends, and then they have nowhere to turn?
Yeah. I mean, that's definitely one of the reasons, and
Sure.
I lived it myself, which was, I got to the dream, if you will, playing professionally, and got to realize what that was, and I was like, all that work and this, and I don't bash anyone that that's what they love and that's what they embody, and that's awesome. To me, it's not. I don't. If you want to go be a WNBA player, that's awesome. Or if you want to be a lawyer or a doctor or whatever it may be, but it's just understanding that like you have choices along the way.
Yeah.
And getting to the point of WNBA is 2%. You know what I mean? And I think a lot of times for female athletes, what I've observed is that a lot of the times we don't necessarily grow up with hoop dreams, if you will. Meaning NBA, young boys are playing
Sure.
at the park at the age of 4 and they're like, I just want to be LeBron.
Yeah.
Young girls now, it's a little bit different. A lot of times we get into the game for the social aspect. Mm-hmm. We don't really know necessarily our why as early on, just because there's not a financial rainbow at the end of our career in sport. And so for me, it's just whatever you want to do, but use this sport, use that platform,
Sure.
No matter where you go. I mean, you're in a slew of resources if you make it to the college level, and how can you maximize those, and how can you use your time in order to try other things and stand for other things, because there is a time when it's going to end. So when it does, what are you going to do?
Yeah, absolutely. So for those people that are listening and don't know exactly how you help those type of people, can you give us maybe 1 or 2 examples of how you help people envision something outside of the sport they're playing?
I really just, when I go in and I do the workshops, I just kind of challenge thoughts, if you will.
Sure.
And challenge in a loving way, of, okay, what are your dreams? Let's talk about it. And then we break it down. Okay, so goals, right? Daily goals, long-term goals. It just kind of depends which demographic I'm working with. But ultimately, for me, it comes down to, that self-awareness, loving yourself and being yourself. Because I'm not telling you that you going through my program is going to land you your dream job, or it's going to get you in front of a, recruiter for Nike and you go work for Nike. Like, I'm not promising any of that. Sure. What I'm saying is if you develop a sense of self and loving yourself and being yourself, no matter the ups and downs that you go through in life, you're always able to come back centered, and your 100%. Identity is able to always be centered. 100%. And that's my goal, is just for these young girls early on, for us to start telling them that you are enough. You're capable. The sport is not your identity. You can do way more than this if you choose. that is what I want them to know early on. So when they get to this point of moving out of sport or having to make other choices for their career or their middle half of their life, if you will, that they're able to say, you know what? I know myself. This is what I want to do. This is how I'm going to go about it.
That's awesome.
I love it. Me.
No, I absolutely love that answer. And it's like kind of defining your why, like you were saying, like a lot of women or at the time girls don't know what they want to do growing up playing the sport, but a lot of boys do. And defining your why, I mean, gosh, I still feel like, you know, I was talking about evolution of one, you know, being self-aware and everything, but I'm still defining my why ultimately. But helping, oh my gosh, I've talked to so many people. So at the time of this conversation release, this will have already come out. But I had talked to somebody for conversation number 59, and then another one of my previous guests, Inez. So Inez and Jen had both talked about heavily about emotional intelligence, and we talked about emotional intelligence in our children, which is huge, which why I love why you dove back into that, into children, helping them realize from a younger age that there are possibilities, and starting from within, again, like you did with yourself, being self-aware, but helping these kids understand to be self-aware at an earlier age. So then no matter which way, you know, no matter which way that we were talking about that ball comes, no matter which way you're going to pass it, you know, ultimately you can always look back in on yourself and you know you can make the best decisions possible. Whatever decision you make is going to be a decision that came from an entity that's self-aware, and you are confident in that you are making the best decisions and that ultimately you will get to where you want to get. And yeah,
the evolution of, you know, you're in high school, you're in middle school, right? You're underneath the household with your parents. And so your choices are controlled. Then you move to college and you get a new set of choices, but you're still going to practice. You're still going to, you know, the study hall and so forth. And then you get to the professional level and you have another set of choices. Now you're getting paid. You have money to manage X, Y, and Z. And then you get into the real world where you start to see, wow, no one's going to pick me up for practice. No one's going to make me run because I don't show up to work. You know, no one's going to tell me to put my phone away at work. They're just going to let me go. You know, so you start, like, each level has more and more choices. So the more we can start teaching these young kids early on that you have a choice of what you want to be and who you want to become. But it's going to be hard, you know, and you're going to have to make those choices, and then you have to live with what comes with it. And that was my transition of coming out of professional basketball. It was a tough choice to make because I was the professional athlete. I did all these great things, like you said earlier, like all these accolades that I had. And I'm
it's
like,
badass. Don't sell yourself short. Come on.
I mean, like really, it kind of becomes a part of your identity, and you're kind of like, you know, stepping away from it is really difficult and hard because you're stepping into the unknown. And so it's just about making those choices and then trusting what comes with it, good and bad.
Yeah, and I think you have more trust in those choices if you've had somebody that's helped you in your life, like you're helping these people, right? Because if you're so self-aware to a point where you feel confident in the choices you're making, that's just going to help you so much more all the way. And just having choices in life is good. It can be double-edged. To play devil advocates, a lot of time I preach about having only a plan A and not having a plan B, because you will default to that plan B. So, you know, none of these things are concrete. And I think ultimately, if you always double back and you always are self-aware and you go back to what you've reiterated a few times here, then you will be confident, like we said, you will make the best choices. And no matter if it's plan A or plan B, you're going to go the best path for you.
Yeah, and I'll just kind of, you know, piggyback off that a little bit. And when I was a little girl, and my mom used to take me to the WNBA games, and I was at the WNBA games, but like I never wanted to take pictures with the WNBA players. I always wanted to take pictures with the cheerleaders since a young girl.
Yeah.
And then I moved into high school. I was kind of like the standout player, if you will, but like really didn't like understand why. I was just kind of going with the process. Then I got to college and they were all telling me I'd go to the WNBA. I had a WNBA coach come to me and say, hey, like if you work really hard, like you can make it to the league and you can do this. And I just remember like not even feeling any type of way about that. I was like, oh, okay, that's cool.
That's crazy.
And then I got to the point like where I got to the professional level, and I just remember being like, this is what it is. And I was like, oh my gosh, like not that it was like, I was upset about it or anything, but I was
Sure.
like, wow, I made it here, and this is what it is. Okay, this makes sense. Why maybe I personally wasn't as passionate about this,
Mm-hmm.
but there's reason that I got to this point. There's a reason that this is my story, and then how can I take this and then essentially help this group better understand this process
Sure.
and understand that there is a ceiling. At this point, there is a ceiling,
Yeah.
and that was me, is creating something that didn't have a ceiling.
I was actually just about to go into that. Like you create, it's so, you're in my head there for a second because you're talking about having a ceiling there, professional sports, that you cannot go higher by default. So how do you go higher? You create something of your own. So I think that's just great. Taking that out of sports, taking that away from athletes to visionaries, like it's just such a good point for life. Like if you quote unquote think you have a ceiling in life, think about another way. Like I was telling the other day to somebody, or I posted about it, like if you have a plan A, that's great. Don't have a plan B, but just to have another way to figure out to have plan A work. So if there's a ceiling on plan A, then just figure out another way. If there's a ceiling, great. And that's awesome. Like again, like from me to you right here, like don't sell yourself short. That's incredible. But at the same time, if there is more to that, like that, there is a finite timeline for that, especially in sports, right? Athleticism, age, all that stuff, right? So if you want to take something out there, like I always love hearing the stories about all these athletes that have just done all these charities and all this missionary work and all of this stuff, after the fact. And I think that's amazing. So for you to do that is great. I did have a question for you though that came up when you were talking. You were saying when you were in college, people said, "Oh my gosh, you were approached by WNBA coaches. We want you to come play for us." And I'm sure people and parents, maybe even friends, family, were edging you on like, "Hey, you should go play. You have this opportunity." But I'll pose the question. I mean, because you said it wasn't really, so this was what it is. I can't believe it's like this. I mean, is that deep down in your heart what you truly wanted to do, or do you think you were pushed a little bit by some people around you at the time, or how did that, how did you come into that? How did you feel going through that whole entire process?
In terms of college to professional level?
I think the whole ladder of it, from being a little girl playing basketball, growing into, from middle school to high school, and then from high school to college, so I guess just in general, do you think you would have, if there was no other voices from the outside, do you think you would have still followed that path all the way to that ceiling?
Yes. And I say this because I felt like I belonged in sport.
Okay.
And it served its purpose. I played volleyball as well. That was a really hard decision to make. I've had great friends still till today. I learned things, discipline, hard work, commitment, so many different intangible things that I've learned that I would never change it. Nothing about it. Mm-hmm. I think sport is absolutely amazing for women. And I think young girls, every girl should get involved in sport. I wholeheartedly mean that. The amount of confidence that's instilled in girls through playing sport and being a part of team, you cannot get anywhere else. Absolutely. And the opportunity to get your schooling paid for is an amazing opportunity that many, 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 many people do not have. And I don't even know necessarily athletes that are on scholarship realize that. But so I wouldn't have changed any of that. And, and I'm very fortunate that I had parents that allowed me to move through my process with my choices. So when it came to me choosing, okay, volleyball or basketball, which one are you going to do? They allowed me to choose that and stand in. They awesome. Came to college. They were like, okay, your decision, and when it came to leaving college, and because I had, I could have went and stayed another year, but I wanted to go play professionally. They allowed me to choose that. And I think that is really the common denominator for so many young girls is the parent aspect and that influence of if your parents are somewhat living through you or they want you to come to a level of success, you're not allowed to then freely choose, which prolongs your process of really getting to what the heck you want to do in this world. Yeah. And I just didn't have that. My parents were like, okay, you want to go be an entrepreneur? Go for it. It's going to be hard, but do it. We got your support. Awesome. Come on, move in with me. We know how it goes. So it was just, I'm just so thankful for that. I can't,
that support system's awesome. And it's one of the things I saw you talk about before is, one of the way back, I have a weird memory sometimes, but 3 things that you absolutely love in life the three important things that have helped you, and your number one was family and support system. And it couples back with something you even said earlier about you have choices. So it's just funny. I just love peering into your brain for these quick moments and seeing how all these things connect. But having that strong support system from your family and your friends, having the ability, having the choices that your parents let you do, they didn't force you into these other things. And then, we're talking about coaching young women, young children at a young age with EQ and all of these things, right? So your parents, quote unquote, parented you, coached you at a young age, and now you're able to pass it on. So by default, in my brain, I can confidently say that the more people we coach in this manner, the more kids we parent in this manner of EQ and allowing them to realize they have choices, to be self-aware, by default, then again, the more people will, it's goes on and goes on and on and on and on. It's compounds, it compounds and compounds. So it's just funny to see that. So I love how you answered that, and it's really cool because it made me kind of understand who you are more of a person, because I can kind of envision how your parents were throughout this whole entire thing. It's got to be crazy because you're like 2%, right? So not a lot of kids or not a lot of parents get to experience their child or themselves going through this. So I can imagine like some parents be like, you're going to play NCAA no matter what, or you're going to play in the WNBA or whatever, sport you're going to play in. So I think it takes a lot of self-control and a lot of self-awareness for the parent to be like, hey, let's digress for a second and let's make her or him make his own decisions. And that's, I think, what's very important in you becoming the woman that you are today.
And everyone's going to have to make them at some point. Parents, any parents that are watching this, like if we control their choices all the way up till, college or whatever, and then they're going to get out into the real world, they're going to have to make decisions. Like, so the earlier they can start making those and owning them and walking in them, the better off they'll be.
I couldn't agree with you more, and I think that's an absolutely perfect note to end on. And I cannot believe 30 minutes has just whizzed by so quickly already. I just appreciate me letting you ask you some of these questions, a little bit more personal sometimes, about parents, family, all these things about your business. And I just really appreciate it always. I never take these for granted. So thank you so much. Is there a best way that if somebody wanted to peer into your mind a little bit more or talk about athletes to visionaries with you, what's the best way to get in touch with you?
Yeah, absolutely. So Instagram is where I'm most active, and it's Morgan_Jones_MJ. And on there, pretty soon, within the next couple of weeks, I'll be promoting my summit that I'm hosting, Athletes to Visionaries Youth Summit for female student athletes, parents, and coaches. How fitting, right?
Yeah, yeah. See, it's all connected.
In Orlando, Florida. So that'll be happening in August. I'm really excited about taking basically the conversation we just had and integrating these roles so that female athletes' lives can be changed with perspective.
Yeah, that's incredible. I highly encourage everybody to go to your Instagram page, check you out, see what you're doing. You put out great stuff, and that's how I found you. That's how I found so many incredible people. Social media is an amazing tool. It's a tool just that. You can use it to just screw off, but you can use it to connect with amazing people. And honestly, I wouldn't have this conversation if I wouldn't have had that. So again, thank you so much. Thanks for sharing all this stuff.
And thank you so much for having me on. I think this is incredible. These conversations are needed. There's so much perspective and insight that you are giving all of your listeners. And so thank you for allowing me to be a part.
Absolutely. It's the gift that keeps on giving. We just want to record these things so more people can hear them and hopefully encourage more people to spark these types of conversations in themselves and their parents and their children. Keep that gift, keep on going. So Morgan, thank you so very much, and please enjoy the rest of your day.
Awesome. You too.
See ya.